Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thank you American Salon for having me. So before we get started, let's check out this haircut you see right here. This is a bald taper. This is the look that I'm going to go step by step and showing you how to achieve this look. Get a better view right here, how it blends nice into the side. And we're going to go step by step and help you guys out with some tricks and some little tips and advice. This is my model William. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to leave a question in the comments and he's going to be reading that to me. So here we go. Let's start on this brand new side. Now the first thing I'm going to do, I want to remove all of this weight in this area because it's going to be a whole lot easier to see what we're working with as we are taking all this down so that none of the hair is hanging over. And I'm going to start with my 1.5 guard. Okay, here we go, it's a 1.5 right here. Let's throw this on there. I'm going to start open because everything that I do, I want to make sure that I'm leaving more on the head, and if anything we can do is we can remove that later on. So I'm going to start with my 1.5 open. I stop to about where the widest part of the side of the head is because I want to make sure it's easy to blend that section up top. And as I'm moving through the hair, you'll see kind of a very low C kind of scoop because I want to make sure I'm not rounding with the head and creating new guidelines. This is going to help me transition into the hair a whole lot easier than having to go with the head. I'm going to work my way all the way through. I'm going to drop the hair in this back area just a little bit because I want to make sure I'm not removing this completely flat and I'm still using the hair to kind of mold and give the overall shape a very well balanced look. Now that I have that done, right here you'll notice there's a lot of growth patterns, and the way to get into those is I want to go against the hair growth, so I'm going to go right against it. Some parts are going straight up, some are going to the side. Every client that you have in your chair will give you a different challenge. You kind of just go against all those areas and that'll help lighten it a lot. Going around the ear. Don't be afraid to fold the ears down to get right around that. Now once I have most of that done, with the same tool that I created this guideline with, I'm going to use the same exact step. Now I'm doing some clipper over comb. I'm going to keep everything very squared. So what I'm going to do now is do clipper over comb. I have a carbon comb that doesn't bend. This is really helpful because this is not going to bend to the shape of the head. This is a very stiff comb. And I'm going to go step by step. Still with my 1.5 guard. Blending this completely straight up. You kind of see it lightening up a little bit. You want to look for the shadows because that's what's going to really bring the blend together. And again, if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to leave it in the comments. William will read the questions out loud to me so that we can get to all of your answers. Okay, so from here on this point, I'm going to grab my liners and I'm going to start edging out the section that I'm going to be working on, which is going to be this sideburn first. Okay, so I'm going to start with the edge. I'm going to kind of use it kind of like a pencil. And I'm going to just put a light line in first. I don't want to put it too harsh because I'm going to go back to it and clean it up with the razor. I'm just using this to kind of etch where I'm going to be going with the razor, and this is going to help keep that C shape without going too far. And notice that I'm going very close to the hairline. The last thing we want to do is pull the line in too far back from their natural, that the regrowth is going to be really tough for them. I have that in. Right around the ears, same way. The easiest way to go about this, I do half of this at a time. So I'm going to work from here to here, stop at the top, and I'm going to come back from the back of the ear.
All right, Sophie, you have a question?
Yes, what's the question?
This comes from Cambria Dawn. All right, what helps you guide yourself to know exactly how high to go on sides and back?
It depends on what the client wants. So say, for example, for William over here, we're going to be doing a low-mid taper. So how I would go about that is keep this in mind. This is always going to be my starting point. If you're doing any tapers and the taper goes beyond this point, you've transitioning it into now what is typically called a fade. And since we're doing a taper, I want to make sure this is going to be my always starting point. So when I'm doing low tapers, this is where my guideline would be. If I'm doing a mid taper, it goes slightly higher, and then if I'm going a high taper, it goes slightly higher than that. But this is always going to stay the same so that you know exactly where to start and not let it go past that point. So that's kind of how I figure it out. And if I were to do a fade, same exact reason. If I'm going to be doing a low fade, this is kind of the way it would transition all the way through. Mid would be a little bit higher, and then the highs, it's more of like your military high and tights that usually go all the way up here. So I hope that answers your question.
All right. And then we have a second question from Taylor. Any tips for ears?
Ears, yes. So what I said right earlier is you want to work from one side at a time, because sometimes, say you're going from here to here, you might get lost and then this side hits this side. And this has happened to all of us at one point, right? So you want to make sure is you're not afraid to bend the ear. So when I'm working from this side, I'm coming in from this side with my right side. And then once I get to the top, I'm going to work in reverse. And it's almost like you're meeting it in the middle. But at the same time, you want to make sure you see that imaginary C section that you're going to create so that it comes into a nice arch and less of this coming to a straight edge. So you can see here, it's softening up. And I'm not putting in very hard lines yet. I'm just kind of etching this out because I will go over it again with the straight razor to make sure it's completely cleaned up. Okay, so now for starting the taper itself. And I'm going to start with my first guideline. This is going to be my bald line, right? I'm going to show you guys the technique that I use that helps me keep this line from going higher and higher and higher, okay? So I'm going to start with this first one. I'm going to bald this out, right? And that's my first guideline. Whatever guideline I create, whether it's straight or round, you must follow that completely all the way up so that the blend is consistent. If not, you're going to get a lot of choppiness to it.
All right, we have a couple more questions. This is from Caroline. Question is, do you always cut on dry hair?
Yes, it's a little bit easier. When you're working with men's hair and you're working with such short hairs, if this is wet, those little hairs will be sticking everywhere. So I typically would always start dry. You could always go back and use wet, but it's going to be really hard to see because these hairs are going to stick. As you can see here already, it's dry and it's already sticking to a lot of parts. So I would definitely say dry hair would be best.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then we have a couple more questions, all similar to what brand of clippers are you using?
I am using all Babyliss Pro tools. Let me briefly go over the tool setup that I have right here. This is what I recommend to a lot of people that are learning how to cut hair. This is a Babyliss 880. What's really cool about this one is most people have seen these before, right? You have the free-floating lever right here on the side. But what's special about this tool is that it has these little speed bumps. It's about 5 different notches that as you're transitioning, you can feel it kind of bump. They're just like little bumps. And it helps with a lot of keeping the blends a lot more consistent. And then we have this other one. This is the FX 671 that I tend to use the most. Same kind of step as the 880, but you have this click into place and you can kind of hear it. And this also allows you to not have to think so much about where you're at, and it makes it pretty easy to remember while you're doing it. Right now I'm using the 671. So this is going into the technique to keeping your blends where they need to be without chasing it too high. So I did the first area where I balled out the line. Now my next step, I'm going to grab my clipper with no guard. I'm going to open all the way, and I'm going to make my first guideline. At this point here, you see right there's two faint lines. There's one here, which is our bald line that we created right away, and this is my new guideline up here. These are still parallel to each other, and you want to make sure that it stays consistent throughout the blend that you're working on. So from this point on, now I've set my guideline to know I'm not going to go past this point. So now I'm going to close my clipper, lever adjustment lower to a shorter length, and I'm going to work right below that. And this is going to help me from making this line go higher and higher.
Alright, just another quick question real quick. How many years have you been cutting hair?
I am, with barbering, I've been going into it for 6 years now, a total of 7 years.
Perfect. And then another question. What brush is being used, and additionally, are the bristles soft?
These are soft. These are definitely kind of like the nail brushes most people would recognize this from, but there are some barbering companies now that make these with a very soft bristle that you can use against the face that won't cause a lot of irritation.
Okay. Next, another question is from Emilio, asking, are you using clips from lower to higher?
Yes. Anytime I work with skin, I'm building from the bottom to the top. Yes, I would remove this first if it's too long, but I'm going to build the skin section from the bottom to the top. It'll be your easiest route to go without getting too lost if you were to go in reverse. Now I have my 0.5 guard, so see how it all blended in now? I started with the bottom, I created my new guideline, and then I went back down and blended in between. Now the next section is the same exact steps. I have my half guard on it now. This is my 0.5 guard, all the way open, and now I'm going to create my new guideline once again. Now I know, don't go past that point. Do the exact same thing, and I'm going to blend back down again.
Alright. Another question. This is from Poncho. Did you zero gap the liners, I believe?
Yes. Everything that I use are all gapped. They're not completely zero gap, but they'll sit right below the actual still blade, because if they are zero gap, they will cut your clients. And I always double check my tools. When I'm using any kind of liners, you always want to make sure to check on them on the back of your hand, and I will do this all the time before I start on people, because the last thing you want to do is cut the clients. Certain people, kids especially, have a lot more sensitive skin, so you definitely want to be careful with that, because if these aren't sharp, you're going to find yourself pushing against the skin. And I've seen this happen before, where people are pressing harder and harder because they feel like the tools are not getting as close. So the way to do that is that you will have to adjust any tools. And when you're working with any kind of skin blending of this type of this kind of look, you will have to do that. Companies are not going to sell you tools that are gapped to hurt somebody. So this is something you have to do on your own to get it this close, so that the transition is a lot easier. Because if I were to use a tool that I didn't adjust, I'm always going to have one faint line that I can't get out. And the only reason is because the tools won't be adjusted as close as they should be. So that's definitely something to keep in mind when you are thinking of going this short, is to make sure your tools are adjusted properly. You can kind of see now the 0.5 is clearing up, and now we're going to move up a little higher now into our number 1 guard. And this, we start off with a 1.5, so this one should start bringing everything right in together. Now I do all my baseline work right away first, and then I kind of go back and detail things a little bit later. Sometimes you're not going to be able to always see things with your eyes, and this is what you'll find in barbershops many times, that they are usually facing away from the mirror, the clients themselves, because usually we tend to work on the side that's facing the mirror so that we can see what our eyes can't see, and that's a major thing to to use. It's an extra tool that will really help you see any kind of shadows in the head, that will help you kind of be able to clean a little bit more than what your eyes can see. And don't get mad if you can't see things in the beginning. This is something that kind of changes through time. The more you do it, your eyes kind of develop and become more detailed as it goes on. You know, I've done haircuts before in the beginning where I thought were really clean, and then looking back at it a couple years later, I see all these flaws that I couldn't see before. So don't get frustrated if you can't see it right away, but just know that you want to keep looking for those things, because it's gonna help you kind of bring everything a little bit tighter than when you started.
All right. Another question is from Bobby. I think this is referring to the previous clipper that you're using. How many guards does that clipper have?
Which this one? This one, if you actually buy this one, a lot of people have questions about these two mainly. And just to be clear, this comes with 1 through 8. We were able to add the 0.5 and the 1.5 red guards to this, but they don't come together. So you will have to buy the red guards separately to have that 0.5 and the 1.5 for this tool that a lot of people have. But if you have this one, this is a new one that came out this year. This is the 671. It comes with all black guards, similar to these, but it will have the 0.5 and the 1.5. So this one's pretty cool that it has that. You can see the scalp's not moving around either. I have a very light pressure against the scalp to not cause any irritation. I'm letting the tools kind of glide over the head shape. I'm not applying pressure. I'm not pulling the skin. Now I'm going to go back in and detail a little bit using my cordless 673s. Another great tool to have as well.
We have another question from Eric. Any tips for a cosmetologist that would like to cross over to mostly barbering?
Yes, definitely. You know, you're only going to get better at it the more you do it. I advise doing the crossover program so you get a lot of practice in. I started off practicing a lot on my family members, close friends, and you know, the only way it's ever going to get easier is you're going to have to do it a lot, and understanding the tools, because they should be an extension of you, and that's the best way to describe it, because you have to know your tools so that you can understand exactly what kind of steps that you have to do. So I'm going to go in now. I'm going to just razor clean this finish, and you're going to kind of see the taper come out a little bit stronger right here. You know, the frame is a really important part of the cut. This is the finishing touch. Whether it be natural, whether it be sharp, it kind of, you know, either way, you want to make sure you have a nice clean finish. I always ask my clients, you never want to jump right in and do this either. This is also optional. Not everybody gets the super pointy cleanup, but it's really great to know how to do a little tighter finish. Now you can see right there, it's kind of really brought out that shape, right? And it kind of brings the taper even lower than what it looked like when it started, because now we've cleaned this up.
All right, 2 more questions. We have Cambria asking, do you prefer your clippers to be heavy or lightweight?
When I first started, I truthfully didn't know. So my first clipper that I used was actually really heavy. But if you're doing mainly male clientele, it will kind of wear your hands out a little bit. So I prefer now to use something lighter. Like this is a metal one, but it actually looks a lot lighter than it seems. Kind of feels like you're holding a flashlight or a dumbbell. This is a pretty comfortable feel, and it doesn't weigh my hands out a lot. And then both of these tools are super light, which I really enjoy, because if I use it all day, it doesn't feel like my hands are being cramped. So I definitely do advise looking into something that you feel is a good weight.
All right, and how much time do you think this particular cut would take?
For me, most of my haircut appointments are between 45 to an hour. I'm going back in and kind of cleaning up these little hairs that I see.
All right, we have a question from Janelle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me some words of wisdom to becoming successful in this industry?
I definitely would say you gotta find something you love, because with hair it's like we have so many different options. I started off doing women's hair, and I can tell you that I didn't feel as though this was it for me. Once I got into men's hair, I actually enjoyed it a lot, and it's hard to be great at something unless you feel happy doing it all the time. So I would say definitely find whatever that is first, and then do it because you love it, and from there the opportunities will find itself. Okay, so now we have this done. Now you can see it, and now I can clean it even further. I'm going to go back in again with my trimmers.
I have another question right here. It's from Lisa. Do you ever get hair splinters?
All the time. That is always going to happen. This is the reason why some people wear gloves. I don't wear gloves. I just kind of take the splinters as it comes. It's hard for me to feel the hair, but I know definitely gloves help some people. It's just going to happen. You can't avoid the hair splinters at all.
All right, another question is from Haiti. Do you prefer not to name drop brands?
Name drop brands? As in what?
All right, I'll hold off on that question right now.
Okay.
Just another one. Are you a cosmetologist and a barber?
I am a cosmetologist. Okay, now there you see that. It's cleaned up pretty good. Now this is a cool little trick. I'm going to be using hair fibers to kind of darken that area to bring out the taper a little bit. You'll see this happen a lot. People use it for photo shoots. If you could see here how much darker it is than this side, right? This is a pretty cool little trick. It's very temporary. It comes off when they shower. Now, first thing I want to do first is make sure I line this up right. And when I'm lining up the hairline, you can see that I'm not pushing it all the way back. We want to keep it close to the natural as possible. He previously already had a lineup, so I am just following this. I start in the middle, and then I work my way out.
I have another question from a couple people. They're asking, how much would you usually charge for a haircut like this?
My haircuts are between $75 and $85 right now for the haircut portion itself.
This question is from Kathy. What is the best way to do a good fade?
The best way? That's a tough question because there's not necessarily one way of doing it, and this is where the practice part comes in. There's different methods of doing it, and I advise everybody to try different ways of doing it to see what is the most comfortable for you, because even against most of the people that I'm around, everybody kind of cuts a different way. So you want to try all different methods until you find one that works best for you, because it's really hard to say that one way is going to be better than another way.
All right, another question from Brianna. How long have you been licensed?
It's been a total of 7 years now.
Another question from Caitlin. How do you do edge ups with hairlines that aren't straight and have points?
You try your best. I would ask the clients first. Sometimes there's some really crazy cases where, one side of the hair is like super in and some are a little bit off. That is up to them at that point. I ask them if they are going to be maintaining this weekly. If it is weekly, then I might just take off that whole thing if that's truly what they want. But most of the time I do advise people that don't have a crazy hairline to just keep it more natural based on the style of hair that they're getting. Now, if they're getting haircuts once a week, every once or a week and a half, they can kind of do all those lineups because they're going to grow in and take care of it right away. But I would ask if what kind of schedule that they're on for haircuts, because that's going to determine whether I do a lineup on them or not.
A couple more questions. This is from Hannah. Where do you get your razors from?
I usually buy them on Amazon. I use Astra blades. They're pretty sharp. I like them a lot. Astras or Rockwells are good. I've tried a lot of different brands. Jatai has some really good blades as well, if you want to spend a little bit more money.
Okay. Another question. Do you do shows in Europe?
Europe, I haven't done one yet. I'm not sure, but I think I will be doing the London hair show. I think it's in September, possibly. That might be my first Europe show.
Alright, another question. How long does it usually take for you to do a fade-in?
All my appointments take about 45 to an hour, depending on the hair texture and the fade style. There's so many different kinds of fades.
Okay, so for you, Jessica, is the gold on your trimmer custom?
No, this actually comes like that, and you could purchase these on Amazon. You just look up gold trimmers by Babyliss, and you'll be able to find this.
This is from Ashton asking, he has been told that cosmetologists cannot legally use a straight razor. Is that just for his state, or is it everywhere?
It depends state by state. They all have different laws.
Another question. What is a good hair fiber brand?
Hair fiber brand? There's some where they use more real human hair. Hair Illusions has one. Topic has another one. That one I don't believe is actual real hair, but that's kind of what I use over here. I use the Topic, is what you'll see here. I'm going to use that a little bit over here now. I'm trying to see how I apply that. It's very light. I get a business card of any sort, and I'm going to use that to kind of be my shield. And I spray from a distance, and it's pretty cool. You kind of see it lighten up a little bit. This is really cool for like video photo shoots. It's a temporary fix, of course, but it's just cool to add. Clients appreciate it if that's what they're looking for.
I have some more questions. Will you do any classes near Pittsburgh or Vermont?
My closest one to there at the moment is going to be in Maryland. The information will be on my Instagram. You'll be able to find the flyer and then shoot me an email if you have any questions about how to get into that class. I'll be out there on the 28th of May. That's my closest class out there so far.
Okay. Another question. Are all your clippers the same brand?
Yes. I use four main ones, and then I'll go over it again. Just the names. This is the 673. It's a cordless, really cool. Another cordless that I really enjoy. This is the X2, another cordless, 3-hour runtime. Both of these have an awesome indicator light that tell you you have 15 minutes left. This is very useful. And this is my 673. This is the same blade as this one, so they use the same exact guards. And then I have the 880, which use a different set of guards. This would be the ones that I use for that. And this also is great because it comes with the 0.5 and the 1.5 that I always talk about that you will need if you're going into the skin stuff. Not every clipper comes with the 0.5, and that's kind of where the confusion comes a lot, because people will buy clippers and then they'll do a haircut and feel like it's not getting as close or that they're missing a step, and that's because you need to find yourself that 0.5 guard. So I'm going to spray a little bit more right here. And once I line this up, it's going to really bring it all to life, and you'll see it a lot darker than what it's at right now. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in. I'm going to edge this up. Now I'm pulling away from every section that I work with. I don't use the whole blade. I'm just using the corners. Same right here. Kind of see it all come together now. check that out.
All right, we have a question from Elsa over here. Was it difficult to break into a male-dominated profession, and what are some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
It is definitely tough. For females that I've spoke to all over the States and online, you know, it is going to be hard because there's not that many of us. So depending on the certain areas, some have more females than others, but the same way that it was a little bit tough for me might be the same for a lot of girls. And you know, it's unfortunate that we have to come across these things, but you know, that's kind of where it fuels me. That's kind of helped me, having people that doubted me or that didn't want to sit in my chair. But just keep in mind that there's always going to be more than enough clients to go around. So if one person doesn't want to sit in your chair because you are a girl, then you know, take it pretty lightheartedly, because there's just a lot of stuff that could go in the barbershop that might hurt your feelings, because I've had a pretty emotional roller coaster ride at one point working in the shop. So I'm gonna have to say that's probably my strongest advice, is just to take things as they come, as light as possible, because once you feel passionate about what you want to do and that's your main focus, like everything is just gonna make sense and really be nothing once you get past that. So don't let those kind of things kind of make you feel nervous or fearful or anything like that, because anything that you do is to invest in what you would like to grow in is all going to be worth it at the end.
Another quick question from Christine. Do you need a license to work with a razor blade?
Depending on what state you're in, yes. Yes and no. Some states, I believe, you could have one license for all, and some you need both. Okay, I'm blending this in just a little further, just to bring it out a little bit tighter. This is an electric shaver. This is going to bring it down to as skin as you could feel against the cheek.
Alright, this question comes from Laura. She asks, why would you use so many clippers?
I tend to use more than one, only because if I'm cutting hair all day and you're using one tool, that tool is going to get hot. So I want to make sure that I don't have tools that are hot, because once this blade gets hot and you're putting it on their skin, you can actually burn their skin. So I've seen that happen before. So I tend to use 4 different clippers to kind of balance different things. It's all preference, you don't have to. That's just kind of the reason why. Tools that are always cool and ready to go, especially because I use cordless tools, that if they kind of run out of power, I have a backup that's already plugged in and ready to go. Okay, now we're moving into the back area. I already did half of this side already, so we're gonna meet the other half in the middle. Got my 1.5, bringing all this hair up. I'm not taking it all the way up because, again, I want to make sure I don't flatten the back of the head. Now he has some really crazy cowlicks in this area, which I'm gonna go over on how I get those out.
Question from Emily is asking, what guards do you favor?
These are I don't know the name of them, but these guards fit the X2 and the 671. And you could find these red guards if you have this tool or the X2 that's cordless at stylessource.com. That is the only site I know that carries them, and that's that. Or you go to the hair shows and you'll find the red guards at the Babyliss booth. They should have them. They only launched a little bit ago, so not a lot of places carry them. Okay. Now we'll start from the bottom again. I'm going to go in with my trimmer. That'll be my first guideline.
Emily is looking for the specific number of the guard, I believe.
The 0.5? I use mainly for any kind of tight blending will be the 0.5, the number 1, and the number 1.5. And those are my main 3 guards that I will use for any type of blending that I do.
Question comes from Eric as well. Was clipper over comb hard for you?
That was a lot easier for me than scissor over comb. It's a lot easier for me to finish a whole section using the clipper over comb technique because it was just a little bit faster than doing scissor over comb or just using guards in order. Now from here, I'm going to grab my 0.5 guard. Now this is kind of where all the crazy cowlicks are. So you can see right there, in this area it grows in, so I'm going to go against it. I only use a couple of the teeth sometimes to kind of have to go back in and detail the haircut.
Another question from Ashley. She asked, what is your favorite style to do?
Right now I'm liking a lot of the more like the GQ cuts. They're a little bit longer on top. I kind of like the messy styles that kind of come into something that mixes in with something super sharp and clean, like a little bit of both. Those are kind of actually my favorite right now.
And this is a question again, is what is the name of your clipper?
The name of this clipper that I'm using right now is the 671 by Babyliss.
This question comes from Debbie asking, why do you change the size back and forth?
They change the sides? What is that?
The size.
The size?
Yeah.
The size of the guards? Or the, what sides? The guards? The reason for the guards is they have to connect. If people are confused of metal detachments or this is to change the length. So these are taper adjustments. When this is all the way open, particularly on this model, you'll see the gold and the black. You see how that's far away from each other? That means you have the longest length. So as I'm shifting, these get closer and closer. So now I'm cutting the most off, and that's kind of why you'll see me kind of click through, because I'm adjusting the lever in between to go inside between the blending zones. So whether I would have a 1.5, 1.5, I'm always shifting in between so that I can blend the in between. Now I'm going in and detailing now with my 880. I kind of cut by sound sometimes, so you can kind of hear where it cuts. It's like once I hear it cut, I know I'm not going to keep continuing to go higher than that. And then I kind of work my way back down. And this is kind of my my detailing part of the haircut. Well, I'll go in and use the mirror, look for shadows in the hair, and try to buff those out.
another question from Ashton. What do you do when clients insist on no white walls? Yes, but it is inevitable because of their hairline.
I would definitely explain it. Those are definitely case by case. If they know that they have a crazy hairline, you can actually just, maybe show them the mirror and explain to them that their hairline is a little bit further in, and that's what you'd have to do if you lined it up, or giving them the option to keep it a little bit more filled in, that you don't create such a high white wall, and maybe keep it a little bit more naturally clean so that you can bring it down a little bit more.
Okay. This question comes from Robin. I believe it's asking, why do you use the clippers in an up motion instead of a down motion when you're blending?
I'm going against the hair patterns. For you, there's some people, I guess, that do cut this way. It's pretty difficult to cut in the motion of the hair unless it was curly. His hair is pretty straight, being so short. If I were to cut it this way, it would be extremely difficult to blend from top down. I blend everything when I'm doing skin from the bottom up, and that's going to be the easiest thing to do because you're going against the pattern, so it's just going to cut a little bit better.
Alright, this one's from Matthew. It's asking, why do you switch between clippers?
I switch between clippers because I have them set at different lengths. So this one allows me to stretch the blend a little bit further than my other ones, meaning this blade itself stretches further, and that's why I use different ones, because I don't want to use just one to where it overheats. So right now I have my 0.5, going back and just cleaning different areas that I see that are kind of dark. Now if you look at it from behind, you kind of see the blend. It softens, right? And anything you do see that stand out, you can definitely go back in there and just use the detail of one of your sides to kind of finish those areas out. And you can see right here that there's a little bit of light shadows in certain areas, and that's kind of where I'm kind of going and digging in a little bit extra, just because the hair is going to be, it's not always going to be even. You're going to have dips that you got to deal with. Certain areas have a denser amount of hair and some are lighter, so you kind of have to just blend what you can and try to find the balance all the way across, and that's what's going to keep everything looking real smooth, like you see right here. It kind of all blends in. You got your, this is mainly your 1.5 zone that blends right down into the skin. Any kind of dark shadows, like especially on film, you can kind of see exactly what you use, and you can see this darkness right here. So I'm going to go in a little bit more with a number 1, and you're going to see this little shadow area kind of lighten out. Now if you look at this now, it's definitely a lot lighter than it was. Now it looks a little bit more consistent all the way across.
Okay. Another question. Is there a way to avoid harsh lines?
There's no way to avoid it. It's just the amount of pressure that you're applying to the hair. If you're going with the head and you're following through and scrubbing against the skin, that's what's going to create a lot of harsh lines. What I do is I come in with a really light approach. So when I get to the top of the section that I'm working, I'm almost fanning out, and that's what's going to create less of that harsh line, because every step that you take is going to remove that next line, So if you set yourself up from the beginning, leaving a softer edge, it's going to make the whole transition a whole lot easier.
Another question. Have you ever thought of using metal guards, and what are your thoughts of them?
I've used them before. Metal guards, I think they're fine for removing bulk, but if you are learning how to cut hair with those, it's very difficult to understand. I think that system is a little bit harder to understand, because with that, you don't have all this lever adjustments. You would just have a 1, switch that out, 2, switch that out, 3, all your different lengths. and you have to use probably a lot more pressure techniques, because if you were to go in too far, you might take off too much, and then understanding how to use a comb to also balance different shapes out. So it is a fine tool. You get rid of the hair a lot faster, but I wouldn't advise that tool if you are learning how to cut hair. Even as someone that uses it, that has cut hair for a long time, I think it's still gets a little bit confusing to use. I just think the plastic guards are a little bit easier to understand, and that's what I've been using. You know, I've tried a lot of different tools, and I have to say I would prefer plastic guards over metal detachments.
Alright, next question is, what do you think about walls?
Walls, they have good tools. I used to use a lot of them in the beginning. They do, and now I use mainly Babeless. I not only work for them, but I actually do believe in all the tools that we carry. You could see it in all my videos. That's what I do to transition my haircut. I did this whole haircut using Babeless. There's no lie about it. It works for me. I prefer it.
Another question. Which clipper do you like to use when doing a comb over and to get a nice clean line?
What clipper? What was the question again?
Which clipper do you like to use when doing a comb over to get a nice clean line?
I still use the same exact tools that I've been using. You know, it's the techniques that you will be doing that kind of create the line, or blending out the lines. So it's just the techniques and the practicing that you will put into it that are going to help you achieve like a nice blend in whatever length that you're working on. Okay. Go back in with my 1.5 to kind of finish off that little midsection of the back area right here. And go back in with some clip over comb. Now you could do this with guards and, you know, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way up. But for me, I prefer the clip over comb in this area because it allows me to kind of smooth out the hair a little bit faster, and not having to dig into the dips of the head sometimes. This helps me smooth it out.
And then for your personal preference, between Andes and Walls trimmers, which one do you like better?
Andes or Wall? Let's see. I would probably have to say Andes. So now I'm cleaning right here on the edge. I'm connecting the back. I'm blending everything straight up, keeping everything more squared. So now when you see it from the front, you want to make sure if you use the comb to blend all the way up, you'll see from the front right here that it looks squared, right? From the side. This should all blend up because that was what we were doing. Everything that I do with clip over comb, I bring straight up to create more of that box effect. I step back and forth to kind of look at it from the front. Same thing with the other side that I'm going to do.
Question asking, how would you cut the top?
I would cut the top definitely with scissors, depending on how they would want it. William right here is growing his hair out, so I will not be cutting it. He's gonna continue to grow it out because he wants an undercut style, so I'm letting it grow out. So now I'm going to go back in and redefine the sides of the hair. And this is going to bring out the neck taper in the back. I'm going to turn the head and make sure the skin is very tight when I'm doing this. You want to stretch the neck out and go little by little. I'm using just the front of the blade. Right there. And I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side. You want to make sure it's as balanced as possible. Just like this. Now when you look at it from the back, you should see the balance of how that looks. You don't want to go too narrow to the head, you don't want to go too wide, you want to keep it close to the natural line as possible without bringing it in too much. To kind of give that balance. And this is what's cool, it's like once you do these tapers, it kind of grows in a little bit nicer back here for them. You know, when we used to do all the blocking haircuts, that usually tends to get super thick as it grows back out. So this is a really cool way to kind of finish off your haircuts and leave this area real nice for them. You can see right there. So we've completed the look. Now I'll give you guys a 360 look again. We did a nice edge up, give them a taper, transitions right into the back as you saw earlier, back to this side. It's just a nice little finish without having to do the box. This is really great to learn with your clients, you know, if they've had the same kind of business blocked off thing for a long time. This is a great way to add value to your services and expand some variety. You know, you can, even if you don't want to do skin, I would always advise people to kind of work in little steps, you know, baby steps. You could do a half taper and do a half, block that off just because it's still allowing you to taper it down so it's not bulky. And then work your way into skin and do something like this. You know, practice is everything. When you see it from the side view now, if you look at it from here, you can kind of see the hair it's thicker and it kind of tapers down. So it's just kind of a cool, nice little finish to have. Awesome, awesome, awesome. This completes the cut. I just want to thank you guys. Thank you, American Salon. This video I think will be up on the Facebook page if you want to see or go back to anything. And if you have any questions about anything, please hit up my Instagram. It's staygold31. And I thank you, and I hope you guys have a really great day.